Hey, this is Terry, the creator and host of this podcast. If you find the content here valuable, would you please do us a favor and go to Spotify, Apple, or any place else you get this podcast and subscribe to it and review us? It takes like a minute and it'll really help other people with depression find us and realize that they're not alone either. Hello and welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast, brought to you by Recovery.com, the best place to find mental health and addiction treatment for anyone, anywhere.
Each week, we profile a guest who shares openly about their mental health journey. They share because they understand that when people don't talk about their depression or other mental health conditions, those of us who do struggle with them can feel like we're the only ones, that there's something wrong with us and that no one understands. We understand.
I'm Terry McGuire, the creator and co-host of this podcast. You have my promise that we'll keep it real here. Depression is real, and we're not going to sugarcoat our discussions about it.
Hope is also real, and you'll get a dose of that here too. I'm Carly McCullough, a licensed social worker and educator, and Terry's daughter. We've both experienced depression and also support loved ones struggling with it. We're here to normalize talking about depression and mental health in our communities, as well as our families.
And to share real-world tested strategies that have worked for other people who have walked similar paths. Thanks for joining us.
Have you ever been struggling and you heard a song that spoke to you and helped you shift just enough to see things a little differently? Today's guest didn't hear a song in a moment of crisis. He wrote one.
The song, titled Make It to Tomorrow, became a lifeline for him that day. In this two-part interview, our guest, Andre Henry, shares not only his music, but what was going on in his world, and the world in general, that made him lose hope.
Before we go further, we want to make clear that this conversation and the song at its center are about life with suicidal thoughts or ideations. We want to remind our U.S. and Canadian listeners that the 988 suicide and crisis lines are available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, should you need someone to talk to.
When we recently heard Andre's song online, we immediately reached out to him because, as you'll hear, his song isn't just about pain, it's about survival.
And it's clearly not just Andre's story, because on YouTube alone, the song has been downloaded thousands of times. Andre shared his song with us, which we'll be intercutting with our interview. Here now is singer, songwriter, and author Andre Henry giving his voice to depression.
Andre describes himself as the son of immigrants from Jamaica. He grew up in Stone Mountain, Georgia, near Atlanta.
And, I've been making music my whole life, been able to work with some Motown songwriters who were my mentors and some current hit makers as well, and to play on some important stages in the world. And yeah, I love making music about really resilience. I want to help people feel, especially coming from my own story. So yeah, that's me.
Let's get into the part of your story that relates to mental health. Tell me how depression has impacted your life.
Well, since I was young, I've always had melancholy, if that makes sense. When I was about 8 years old, my mom actually took me to a child psychologist because she was concerned about me. Because my whole life, I've always been a big feeler, and especially those big feelings around sadness and grief and all that kind of stuff. When I was in school, sometimes I would just sit at my desk and just cry for no reason, nothing was going on that I could identify anyway.
It wasn't until Andre's late 20s that he was formally diagnosed with borderline clinical depression.
There have been seasons where it's been paralyzing, where it's I'm just going to sink down in the shower and just let the water run. Who cares? That kind of thing. But music has been so helpful for me in not just in improving my mood, but helping me to process what I'm feeling, and helping me to connect with others who understand the experience that I've had.
There's so many things in that answer that I want to unpack. First of all, going back to you being little Andre, sitting in school when you were just a little kid and melancholy. And I think about you saying nothing was wrong, but what's going on inside?
Well, it's funny is the thought that went through my head when I said nothing was going on is so much is going on when we're kids that we don't know how to articulate, and maybe we're not even feel empowered to name, right? So
Yeah.
I think that I could look back and say, like, man, like my big brother was picking on me all the time. My mom and dad got divorced around that time. Like all these things were happening. And also the conversation around mental health. Remember, like, this is what, like 1992, 1993, right? In the Black community, in the immigrant community, like my father said, it's funny, we were talking the other day, and my dad was like, you're not allowed to know that you have depression in Jamaica. And
Whoa.
that's a very revealing statement about the world that he grew up in, right? And the generation that he grew up in. And so when I said that nothing was going on, as soon as I said it, a thought went through my head and was like, no, actually, but like, I want to go back now after this and journal a bit and think about like, what was going on? These big feelings that we have of these big, difficult feelings, hard feelings, like they don't just come out of nowhere, like it's part of it is like the conditions that we're living.
The conditions Andre was living in the winter of 2022 were especially difficult for him. Tell me the background on the song that we're going to be talking about, Make It to Tomorrow. What was going on in your life? What was the process of writing it? What were you trying to communicate?
I remember on that particular day, well, in that season, rather, I couldn't stop thinking about dying. And I've had seasons like that in my life. I mean, I think probably every year for as far back as I can remember, there's been one day where I'm like, I'm not going to make it. I don't want to be here anymore. And it was that day, 2022.
Whoa.
And I remember like literally just like feeling so distressed and feeling, all the feelings that we have when we feel that way, right? Like the world would be better off without me. I open my phone, I make like this video because I wasn't planning on doing this. And I just like start talking to try to like say, apologize to the people I'm going to leave behind. And I'm pacing around my apartment. And finally, I just go sit down at the piano. And I literally just, as soon as my hands hit the keys, I just started singing exactly what I was feeling. And I sang, sometimes I feel suicidal. And the rest of that first verse just flowed out of my mouth. And I start just pacing around the apartment and singing what I feel.
Sometimes I feel suicidal, but I know I don't want to die. It's just another trial. So I'm hanging on to life by the grab bars, hoping that the next time's far from the triggers that set me off.
So that whole first verse of Make It to Tomorrow was like, sometimes you write a song and you have to carve it out like you're a sculptor, right? Out of stone or something. And sometimes you got so much emotion in you that it just has to come out. And it was one of those moments.
It was also a moment in history that Andre describes as heartbreaking and devastating, the later end of the Black Lives Matter movement.
You live your whole life in a world that says or questions your humanity, right? That says we don't believe that you're actually human like we are, and you constantly have to prove that. That's why I mentioned growing up in Stone Mountain, Georgia, where the Ku Klux Klan was reborn, and then, and you live your whole life, getting stopped and searched by the police, people questioning your intelligence, your capacity, and then you watch people like you get killed over and over and over again on TV or online, right? And then you find this hope and you go, okay, wait, we can create change. And then this whole moment happens and you start looking around and you go, wait, can we though? We say that we are the heroes that we've been waiting for. And there was a moment on the streets where I looked around and said, no, we're not yet.
All of that, plus financial struggles, were bearing down on Andre's mind that day, reminding that suicidal thoughts can result from life crises as well as mental health crises.
When you hear a song like Make It to Tomorrow and you hear a Black person say, sometimes I feel suicidal, there's a chance that like it's not just family history behind that or brain chemistry, right? Like there's there's probably literally a whole world of pain bearing down on the Black mind that sings that lyric.
And you didn't just sing it. It's the first line of the song, which I found fascinating because it would be the last line of a life. It was like you flipped it.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Maybe it's a little shocking to say, but it's real. It's authentic. And as I'm saying that, there's a part of me that is thinking of some of the conversations we have around suicide or that we don't have around suicide. And I don't want to, I don't want every song to start that way, but I think that maybe there's some symbolism in that, that we need to like open up, really. We need to open up this conversation and talk about it, because I do really believe there's something happening in the way that the world is arranged, the structure of the society that we live in, that bears down on us in a way that does make us feel depressed and make some of us say, I don't want to be here anymore.
So right after, sometimes I feel suicidal, the next line is, but I know I don't want to die. And I don't think a lot of people who have not had ideations would understand that those two things exist at the same time. And we always hear someone didn't want to die, they wanted the pain to end. So tell me why you wrote those two lines back to back.
I'm reading this book called How Not to Kill Yourself. I'm going through it very slowly because it's hard to read, because Clancy Martin, the author, writes about this, how it's so common that we feel this way. Like there's a part, and exactly what you said, people end up making the decision to end their lives, usually because they don't see any other way to relieve the pain that they're in, And in my situation, in the time, not just that situation, but every time that I have felt that way, I have felt stuck in some way. I have felt like I'm stuck and tomorrow is just going to be pain. And the next day is just going to be pain. And the next day is just going to be pain. And the next day is going to be pain. Like I can't see a good future when I'm in that place, or any alternative. So, but at the same time, like dying is scary. I don't know what's on the other side of that, So, I mean, that's where that juxtaposition comes from.
So after you say, but I don't want to die, it's just another trial. So I'm hanging on to life by the grab bars, hoping that the next stop's far from the triggers that set me off. What are your triggers? What are the things that make you feel either deeper in your depression or even perhaps that life is not worth the effort it requires to live it?
It's like, that part of the brain that's thinking like rationally, clearly, calmly is just not really on. A huge part of it is like rumination, right? Ruminating on, it's when my inner monologue starts saying, this is what always happens, right? Whatever the bad thing is, this is what always happens. It's when I feel like, I feel like I don't have what it takes to keep going, like my battery is at 3%.
Andre describes it as being existentially stuck. And when he's there, he has to fight for his tomorrow. That means pulling out all the tools in his safety plan and mental health management toolkit.
I gotta make it to tomorrow. Oh, I gotta make it to tomorrow. Oh, I gotta make it to tomorrow. Oh, I gotta make it to tomorrow. Listen now, I'm about to go outside, get a little bit of sunlight into my skin. About to take a jog for the endorphins, it's a sure thing. I know this depression won't take me out. About to make a call to my closest friend, get a laugh and hug myself in the mirror for a minute. I'm trying, cause I wanna make it to tomorrow. I gotta make it to tomorrow. Oh, I gotta make it to tomorrow. Oh, I gotta make it to tomorrow. Oh,
And we will continue our conversation with Andre next week, at which time he will dive into those tools that he uses to protect and manage his mental health. And we will talk about that self-hug and play the whole song.
Absolutely. And so we just want to thank Andre again for not just sharing his music with us, but the context behind what made him write the song and a little more context into who he is and what makes him the artist and the human, and how those factors also contribute to the unique ways in which his depression shows up.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really struck by Andre describing his melancholy as a child.
Right.
And sometimes kids feel the feeling that the rest of the family won't express. And so if sadness, if there's not a lot of space for sadness or grief or joy in a family, that kids can find that role because they're connected to all their emotions, and so they're noticing the ones that the adults are and are not participating in. And I think that can make it really hard for parents too, because you're like, wait, we're all doing fine, seemingly. We're compartmentalizing, we're processing, we're not processing our emotions. And then we have this kid who's feeling really sad. And that also means that I don't know what to do with their sadness. I don't know what to do with their melancholy. I don't know what to do with that depression.
But in a way, they did know what to do, right? Because they brought him to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and that's a lot more than a lot of us had as kids.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, to go, oh, this is not something I feel comfortable with. And if you're not used to healthy expressions of emotions, it can also be really easy to pathologize people who are feeling those emotions. You know, there's something wrong with this kid. He's sad, as opposed to sadness is normal. There's nothing wrong with the kid. I don't know. I think there can be a both and there. I think it's really important that we don't pathologize emotions that are really reasonable to feel.
Yes. I read an interview that he had done, or maybe he had written it and somebody quoted him, but part of it said, I wonder if many people who often feel depressed or anxious are really just a little more compassionate than average, or they're just paying a little more attention to our world. Many things in this world are stressful, depressing, and anxiety-producing. Very reasonable point to make, because it's not just what's wrong with that kid who has melancholy, what's wrong with that anybody else who just doesn't seem to be functioning at the same level as other adults do. You know, it's like there are a whole lot of reasons somebody might be depressed. And, you know, biopsychosocial, there's a social element to it.
In social work, we think about the person in the environment. And it's one of the things that I really appreciate about the framework of social work. And if the environment you are in is depressing, is stressful, where you are fearful about the unknown that feels unpredictable and scary and violent, then your body's actually having a reasonable reaction.
Precisely.
And what we've done as adults in particular is really normalized and celebrated numbing out to that reality.
Agreed.
And so I think one of the things that Andre has done is not only thought about how his big feelings track backwards in his family and lineage, but also he is finding ways in the present tense to connect to it, to metabolize it, and to change the narrative about what it is, to reduce the stigma in his music and to normalize his coping strategies. And so we really hope you've enjoyed the pieces of the song that you've heard so far. And we really hope that you tune in next week to hear more about Andre and all of the gifts that he has to offer our listeners. We really hope that this discussion helps give some language or context to your own depression or ideas for how to support someone else in your life living with it. We invite you to check out the hundreds of episodes in our archive and to explore both the Resource Hub and treatment options on recovery.com. Depression is too dark a road to walk alone.
We'll be back next week.